Imagine you survive this like really severe car crash. You go through the immediate medical protocols, you heal up, and eventually the doctors send you home.
Right. And physically, you look completely fine.
Exactly. Your memory works, your motor skills are totally intact. But then, say, your spouse makes a casual, sarcastic joke at the dinner table, and instead of laughing, your brain perceives it as this violent, deeply offensive threat.
Or a busy grocery store suddenly feels like this overwhelming, terrifying sensory assault, right?
Yeah, you are fundamentally changed. And standard modern medicine basically tells you that you've plateaued, like there is no cure.
Which is an incredibly isolating reality for, well, countless people living with traumatic brain injuries.
Mm.
The physical wounds heal, sure, but the emotional and social processing centers remain broken.
Right, leaving them trapped in a world they just can no longer properly decode. And that profound disconnect, that's the actual foundation of our mission for this deep dive today. We are exploring the physical structural impact that music has on the human brain.
It is such a fascinating area of research right now.
It really is. And to kick off the source stack for today, I came across something I almost threw out at first. It was this bizarre, highly aggressive internal corporate compliance document.
Oh yeah, the zero tolerance manual.
Yes, it was for marketers promoting these two wellness products. One was an immersive wearable audio system called Neck Theater, and the other was a muscle stimulator called Orium's Fit.
The panic in that document is just palpable.
Right. Like they are terrified.
They really are. The legal department is literally threatening immediate termination if any marketer uses words like cure or heal, treat, fix, diagnose, guarantee.
Yeah, they're forcing them to use these incredibly passive phrases instead. Like, you can only claim the audio system supports well-being or, is associated with relaxation.
The irony there is just brilliant. I mean, these corporations are aggressively managing their vocabulary because they want to legally associate their passive audio wearables with major health benefits, but without crossing the line into a medical claim.
Right, they are trying to piggyback on this absolute explosion of actual clinical science surrounding music and neuroplasticity.
Exactly. But the wild thing is, they want you to believe that just letting sound wash over you while you sit on the couch is going to heal you.
Which is just not true. And as we dig into the unfiltered clinical reality today, we are going to see that the science points in a completely different, much more active direction.
The contrast between the marketing hype and the clinical reality is stark. The corporate world wants to sell you a passive shortcut, but the neurological breakthroughs we are seeing require genuine physical engagement.
Right. Which brings us to the core of today's analysis. We are completely tossing that sanitized marketing speak out the window, and we're diving into this groundbreaking study out of Norway.
Led by Berit Marie Dijksteenvik at the University of Bergen and Haukeland University Hospital.
Yeah, published in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience. And it focused on 7 specific patients with mild traumatic brain injury, or MTBI.
The selection criteria for those 7 individuals is actually critical to understanding the weight of these findings. Every single patient was at least 2 years post-injury.
So the window for any spontaneous natural recovery had completely closed.
Exactly. And adding to that, standard multidisciplinary cognitive rehabilitation like the best therapies the conventional medical system had to offer had entirely failed them.
2 years of being told, well, this is as good as it gets. I mean, the psychological toll of that must be incredibly heavy.
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned the invisible symptoms earlier.
Yeah.
From the outside, you don't have a cast on your leg. People don't know to, hold the door open for you.
Yeah, but on the inside, the study outlines a brutal reality. We're talking chronic fatigue, severe sleep disorders, vertigo, and the sheer inability to navigate normal social spaces.
The behavioral deficits are often the most devastating part. Severe depression, intense social withdrawal, and literally a total loss of the ability to interpret the intentions of other people.
Which is wild. And neurologically, all of these specific deficits point back to damage in one primary region, right? The orbitofrontal cortex or the OFC.
Yes, the OFC. And looking at the anatomy in the scans provided in the study, it's just mind-blowing where this is located.
It really is. It sits in the prefrontal cortex right above the orbits, the eye sockets. It's basically resting directly on these jagged, bony protrusions at the base of the skull.
It's an anatomical sitting duck.
Right. If you get into a car crash and experience rotational acceleration, like a severe concussion, the brain is just going to scrape right across those bony ridges.
That is the exact mechanism of injury. It causes what we call diffuse axonal injury. The trauma creates microscopic shearing and tearing of the axons, which are the communication cables connecting different parts of the brain.
And the tricky part is that this microscopic tearing often doesn't even show up on a standard structural MRI, right?
Exactly. The gray matter looks totally intact, but the interconnected processing, the actual wiring, is fundamentally broken.
And the OFC isn't just a random processing center. It takes input from your visual system, your memories, the amygdala, and it weaves all that data together so you can regulate your emotions and understand social cues.
It's a massive job.
It sounds like the brain is this complex orchestra, and the OFC is basically the conductor of our social symphony.
That's a great way to think about it. And to take that metaphor further, think about how a conductor actually communicates with an orchestra. They have to be seen, right?
Yeah, making eye contact, waving the baton.
Exactly. In the brain, that communication happens through white matter tracks, which act like the brain's fiber optic cables.
So when those cables get sheared against the base of the skull, it's like a curtain just drops between the conductor and the musician.
Right. The conductor is still waving the baton, and the string section is still playing their instruments, but because they can't see each other, the music turns into a chaotic cacophony. The symphony just becomes noise.
So when standard medical rehab basically failed to lift that curtain and bring the conductor back, the Norwegian researchers decided to try something entirely different.
Which brings us to the actual intervention, and it's fascinating.
I actually had to read the methodology twice. To fix these microscopically shredded emotional control centers, they used a highly structured neurologic music therapy program. But the actual tool. They handed these patients a classic Norwegian beginner piano book.
Yeah, by an author named Agnestic. The regimen was remarkably straightforward. Each patient received 2 30-minute one-on-one piano lessons a week.
With an experienced instructor.
Yeah.
Right.
For 8 weeks. And alongside that, they were required to do 15 minutes of daily practice at home.
So in total, they were averaging about 3 hours a week of playing, like Mary Had a Little Lamb and other super basic melodies. Okay, wait, I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
You have patients whose lives are completely falling apart because they can't process a simple conversation, and conventional medicine has just thrown its hands up.
Right.
So why on earth would fumbling through a beginner piano book succeed where advanced cognitive therapy failed? Why would that work?
Well, it comes down to a really fundamental misunderstanding of what music is to the brain. We culturally view music as a leisure activity, right? Something relaxing.
These are like background noise while you work.
Exactly. But neurologically speaking, actively playing an instrument is one of the most demanding, complex tasks a human brain can perform.
Because it forces the simultaneous perception of multiple sensory systems?
Yes. Let's break that down, because I think this is where the wearable marketing completely misses the mark.
Mm-hmm.
When you sit at a piano, first, your visual system is deciphering abstract symbols on a sheet of music.
And then translating them into physical actions in real time.
Right. Second, your motor system is coordinating 10 different fingers, often forcing the right hemisphere of the brain to command the left hand to do something completely different from what the left hemisphere is telling the right hand to do.
Oh, wow. So you are forcing the two hemispheres to constantly talk to each other across the corpus callosum.
Yep, that big bridge of nerve fibers in the middle of the brain. And then you have your somatosensory system engaged.
Somatosensory, meaning the physical sense of touch and pressure.
Exactly. Your brain is processing the physical weight, the texture, and the mechanical resistance of the keys beneath your fingers.
Wow.
And finally, your auditory system is acting as this relentless, real-time feedback loop, just constantly verifying if the pitch and rhythm you physically produced actually match the visual intention on the page.
So unlike just passively listening to a playlist on some neck theater device, playing the piano creates an incredibly enriched environment. It's a full brain workout.
It really is. But the researchers didn't just take the patient's word for it after 8 weeks. They wanted hard proof that the physical wiring was actually healing.
And to get that proof, they used fMRI scans before and after the 8-week piano intervention. The design of the task is actually super cool.
Yeah, they weren't trying to play a keyboard inside the MRI tube. They were given a passive listening task where they listened to extracts of Western musical cadences.
Specifically tonica-dominant tonica chords. Now, for those of us who skipped music theory, let's ground that a bit. The tonica is your root chord, your home base.
Right, and the dominant chord creates a sense of tension, a feeling that the music needs to resolve.
And then it returns to the tonica to release that tension. Think of the tension you feel right before the beat drops in an EDM track, or that final, deeply satisfying chord resolution in a classic Beatles song.
That tension and release is really the most fundamental aspect of how we process music.
Huh.
So they pump those specific chords into the patient's ears while scanning their brains.
Looking at blood flow and oxygenation, and they analyze the data using a sophisticated technique called dynamic causal modeling, or DCM.
Which is powerful because DCM doesn't just show a generic light bulb going off in a region of the brain. It actually maps the direction and the strength of the connections.
It shows the actual wiring diagram, who is talking to whom and how loudly.
Exactly. It measures effective connectivity. And the post-intervention scans proved that actual physical rewiring had occurred.
They saw significantly increased functional connectivity between the left and right orbitofrontal cortex. The damaged conductor was basically repairing its own communication lines,
Furthermore, they saw increased activation in the anterior insula.
which is central to the brain's saliency network, basically the brain's spam filter. It dictates what sensory input you actually need to pay attention to and what you can safely ignore.
Which is obviously a crucial function for someone who feels overwhelmed by the noise of a grocery store. But the larger question this raises is the biological mechanism.
Right. How does pressing piano keys physically rebuild a sheared axon sitting above your eye socket? How does a behavior become a biological repair?
It relies on a foundational rule of neuroplasticity known as Hebbian theory, usually summarized as neurons that fire together wire together.
Okay, so when you provide that enriched multimodal environment we talked about, the visual, motor, auditory systems all firing at once, you are demanding immense bandwidth.
And to handle that load, the brain is forced to lay down new physical pathways and repair the myelin, which is the insulation wrapped around those fiber optic cables.
But there has to be a catalyst for that repair. And the study points squarely at one of the most famous neurochemicals we have, dopamine.
Yes. We culturally reduce dopamine to just the happiness chemical, but clinically, it is the neurotransmitter of motivation and stimulus reinforcement learning.
So when you sit down with that beginner piano book, you struggle. Your brain is working overtime.
But when your hands finally execute the rhythm perfectly and your ears hear that satisfying tonica-dominant tonica resolution, your brain's reward circuitry just lights up.
You get that rush of, yes, I did it. I finally got the song right.
And that emotional response triggers a flood of dopamine. It acts as a chemical fixative.
Signaling to the brain, hey, this specific pathway we just used is incredibly valuable. Build more insulation here. Strengthen this connection.
Exactly. The physical act of making music and the joy of mastering it chemically fuels the brain's ability to repair the very same circuits needed for social and emotional regulation.
The joy isn't just a fun byproduct. The joy is the actual medicine driving the myelation, which brings us to the human results.
Because the DCM wiring diagrams are amazing, but what actually happened to the lives of these 7 people?
After just 8 weeks, the patients took a rigorous cognitive test called the CVLT-2. Their scores for memory, attention, and executive learning strategies rose sharply.
Practically matching the levels of healthy control groups, which is astounding. And the real-world functionality data is even more compelling.
6 out of the 7 patients successfully returned to full-time work or study. They reported that their chronic fatigue had lifted, they felt happier, and crucially, they felt socially connected again.
They could decode conversations. The conductor was back on the podium.
But this is a deep dive, and we always want to look at the nuance of the data. We don't want to sound like those aggressive marketers peddling a miracle cure.
Right, science is rarely a straight line. And the study logs reveal some incredible individual variations.
Especially when you compare patient 7 and patient 1.
Patient 7 is a fantastic example of efficiency. He was a 19-year-old who had suffered a diffuse axonal injury and an epidural hematoma.
Just to clarify the medical reality of that, an epidural hematoma is a severe bleed between the skull and the protective outer membrane of the brain. It creates immense, dangerous pressure.
It is a massive, life-threatening trauma. But according to his training logs, patient 7 did the absolute bare minimum required by the study protocol.
Over the entire 8 weeks, he logged exactly 15 hours and 20 minutes of total practice.
But he did the work. He attended his lessons. He did his 15 minutes of daily home practice.
He didn't cram, he just showed up consistently. And his cognitive scores improved significantly. He was able to successfully return to his university studies, which he couldn't do for 2 years.
Now, contrast that trajectory with patient 1. He was a 42-year-old who also suffered a severe MTBI, resulting in deep post-traumatic depression and intense social isolation.
His logs are very revealing. Over the 8 weeks, he only logged 7 hours and 45 minutes of total training time.
Barely half the minimum requirement. The math indicates that while he attended almost all of his in-person lessons, he clearly skipped the daily 15-minute home practice.
He abandoned the independent work.
And the outcome reflects that lack of daily reinforcement. His cognitive scores on the test did improve somewhat, likely from the intense focus during his twice-weekly lessons.
However, in his interviews, he reported that he remained deeply depressed. He still felt isolated, and his social behavior did not improve. He remained on 100% sick leave.
It really highlights the core mechanism of neuroplasticity. You cannot cram for brain recovery. Neuroplasticity requires persistent, repeated signaling.
That small daily effort, just 15 minutes a day at home, is what constantly reminds the brain to keep building those dendritic connections.
A massive effort twice a week simply isn't enough to physically change the structure of the brain.
The biological reality is that you have to put in the daily reps. And honestly, that is the perfect transition to the real mission of this deep dive.
Because this study isn't just a fascinating medical anomaly about brain injury recovery. It holds a mirror up to how music impacts our brains. Every single one of you listening right now.
The implications for our daily lives are profound. If 8 weeks of actively playing simple melodies can physically repair the microscopically sheared emotional control centers of a traumatized brain.
Imagine what that same daily engagement does to build cognitive resilience in a healthy brain.
We are all walking around dealing with incredible amounts of modern stress. Our attention spans are fractured by constant digital bombardment.
And our own internal conductors are working overtime just to filter out the noise and keep our social interactions on track. We are all subject to cognitive fatigue.
That anterior insula, the spam filter we discussed, is constantly overloaded. This research strongly suggests that music is a vital tool for cognitive maintenance.
It sharpens attention, forces complex structural integration, and regulates the emotional networks we use to connect with humanity.
Which brings us to the core takeaway, and honestly, a challenge for you, the listener. We really want you to make an active choice to listen to music more frequently in your life.
Yes, we need to reevaluate our relationship with sound. It shouldn't just be passive background noise.
Exactly. And this goes back to the flaw in that weird marketing compliance document. Buying a fancy wearable and letting background music passively wash over you while you scroll on your phone is not going to rebuild your white matter tracks.
You have to engage.
Take 15 minutes to actively listen to a piece of music every single day. Focus on the instruments, anticipate those tonica-dominant, tonica resolutions we talked about, put on an album and really listen to it.
Or better yet, finally decide to learn that instrument you've been putting off. Buy a cheap keyboard, borrow a guitar.
You do not have to become a virtuoso to reap the neurological benefits. The science proves that the simple, challenging act of engaging with melody and rhythm is what keeps your brain agile.
The more frequently you bring intentional active music into your life, the better your brain health will be.
It really puts things in perspective. We started this deep dive looking at a corporate manual terrified of using the word heal to describe a passive set of speakers.
They were trying to manufacture a legally safe version of a deeply biological truth.
And the truth is that the human brain possesses remarkable plasticity. Active musical engagement is one of the most potent, scientifically validated tools we have to guide that structural growth.
It's not marketing hype, it's biology.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We've just explored how actively engaging with music can physically rebuild our social and emotional processing centers through Hebbian learning neurons firing and wiring together.
Right.
But consider the flip side of that equation. What is the daily background noise of our modern chaotic environment doing to your neural pathways?
If the brain is always adapting to its environment, that is a critical question to ask.
If structured active music is a proven tool for positive neuroplasticity, are we passively wiring ourselves for anxiety, distraction, and social isolation with the chaotic, fragmented noise we allow into our ears every single day?
Wow, yeah.
And if so, could a daily, intentional, active music diet be the ultimate preventative medicine for the modern mind? Something to think about the next time you decide what to listen to. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the clinical power of sound. We hope it changes how you hear the world. Now do your brain a favor and go actively engage with some beautiful music today.